Hi, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Kate. After 24 years in law enforcement, I've recently retired. Retired's a pretty big word for it, really, since I'm studying and pivoting into a new career. Through that time in law enforcement, I had to make sure that I was doing things to manage my mental health and to offset the effects of the ongoing trauma that we see every day. I saw a lot of my friends struggle and some of them fall throughout my journey. And I think it's really important that we focus on our mental health every single day. And for me, one of the things that really helps me is cooking. I love it. I bake sourdough, I bake cookies, I make meals. And for me, it's always been a safe space, a place where I can decompress and just work through everything that's happened in my day, both personally and professionally. I'm so lucky now I get to do it on my own timetable, fit it in with my study, and I'm hoping that you'll enjoy coming on this little journey with me. Okay, for our first recipe in my first video, I'm going to do my standard sourdough loaf. This recipe gives me 3 decent sized loaves, which is fantastic if I want to slice one up and pop it in the freezer to use later on. Or to gift it to family and friends. Our neighbours are very happy when I'm baking, so that's kind of one of the things I want to achieve by this. And the size of the loaf is great because it's just the 2 of us, and that will get us through the next 4 or 5 days. So let's get started. To start with, I fed my starter last night. I will go through this in another video, how I fed my starter. And as you can see, this is where I filled it to. It was only like 30 grams of my starter, my discard, and 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water. And as you can see, she's popped off overnight, which is fantastic. And I've got 1,000 grams a kilo of flour. 200 of that is spelt, a wholemeal spelt organic flour, and the rest is an organic white stone ground flour. And in these loaves, I'm just putting some inclusions in. I mix in these inclusions, and so we've got sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, and golden linseeds, along with a bit of Mingle everything bagel seasoning to give it just a little pop of a garlicky flavour. That's also got black and white sesame seeds in it. And I also have 20 grams of salt in here, 10 grams of just pink Himalayan salt, and 10 grams of smoked Malden sea salt. These inclusions don't give any sort of overwhelming flavour to the sourdough, but it just makes me so happy. It looks amazing, it tastes amazing, and it smells amazing. So here I've got 800 grams of water, and I've just heated that in the microwave to like 33 degrees. I like to do it between 32 and 34 degrees, so room temperature or body temperature. And then we're going to put in 200 grams of starter. Reset that scale, might help. And I'll be just using the leftovers, the remnants in here to, I'll feed it, and that way I can then pop it in the fridge and it's ready for the next time I want to use it. Oh, so good. I'm no expert when it comes to bread making, but I've had a lot of practice over the last couple of years, and through trial and error, this has been my favourite and simplest recipe. I absolutely love it. So I just use a bread whisk. Use whatever you like. Use a spatula, use a whisk. This is great though, just for incorporating that first amount of flour in. And what I want to do is just get that starter mixed into the water. I get so much joy out of making sourdough. I can't believe you can take such simple ingredients, that I can take such simple ingredients and somehow create just these little works of art. As I've discussed, cooking is so therapeutic for me, any kind of cooking, and I find such joy in what you can produce with such little effort most of the time, and just a bit of patience. I think that's one of the reasons why cooking is so therapeutic for me too, because I am not a patient person. I am constantly moving. I find it difficult to sit still, and this kind of forces me to follow a process. And I think that when my head gets too busy, this is something that helps to calm it down a little bit. So I'm going to take that off the scale, get that out of the way. And first up, we're going to, I'm just going to incorporate this flour into here. This will just be a shaggy dough, but you got to make sure you get all that flour incorporated into it so you don't have any dry spots. Pop the flour in just a little bit at a time, mix it in. And then after that, we're going to just cover it and we're going to let it rest for an hour and just allow that moisture to get into that flour. And then after that, we're going to incorporate the salt and the seeds, and we'll take it from there. Now you're going to reach a point where perhaps this bread whisk is not going to do the job getting through it. So that's when I swap over to just a bench scraper or dough scraper. I just find it's easier to get the rest of the flour, and if I do it like this, otherwise the bread whisk often won't pick it up from the bottom, like incorporate it properly from the bottom of the bowl. And like I said, you don't want any dry bits of flour. I've made that mistake before and ended up with kind of these dry, awful kind of lumps in the middle of the loaf. Very unpleasant. Not something you want to share with people you love. Part of what I really enjoy about the process of cooking as well, and the thing that kind of helps my head feel a bit better when I'm feeling a bit scattered. Maybe I've had a bad night's sleep, I've had bad dreams. The process not only of cooking but of also cleaning as I go makes me feel a little bit more in control of my surroundings. So thanks to that job when I was 15 at McDonald's, clean as you go is stuck in my head, and 40 years later, here we are still cleaning as we go. So I'm just turning the bowl and then scraping up from around the sides to get all that flour in. And once I've done that, I'm going to pull it up from the bottom as well, because I know there's going to be flour in the bottom. You may be able to see that. There's something super satisfying about this. Those of you who make sourdough, you'll know what I'm talking about, or bake, or do any kind of hobby, I guess. There's a real satisfaction in seeing something come together, particularly something a little messy like this. To start with such simple ingredients, it just blows my mind. So let's have a little look. So I've still got flour, a little bit of flour stuck in the bottom there, so I'm really going to get in and turn this from the bottom. You are going to get dough on your hands, but like gardening, I think it's kind of half the fun, getting a little messy. Oh yeah, that's great. Okay, so we've incorporated that water and starter into our flour, and as you can see, scraped down the sides pretty well. We're going to cover this and let it rest for an hour. I pop it in the microwave if it's a little cooler, which is not today in the kitchen. It's 22.9 degrees, so that's fine for it to be left just on the stove top. If it's a little colder in your kitchen, find a warm spot. If you have a proofing function on your microwave or oven, even better. But just let it do its thing. Don't try and rush it. Don't heat your oven up and put it in there. It's a recipe for disaster. I know from experience. Just let it sit, and we're going to come back to it in an hour, at which time we're going to pop these seeds and salt in and get it into its proofing container, and we'll take the next steps then. Okay, our first 30 minutes is up, so it's time to do our first set of stretch and folds for this sourdough. As I mentioned before, I like to keep a jug of water just beside me. It just helps to prevent the dough sticking to my hands. And as I also mentioned, adding those extra seeds and stuff does mean that the dough might need a little bit more hydration. So I don't have specific amounts. I'm not really scientific about this. I do much of my cooking by taste and feel and smell. And I encourage that if that makes you feel good. I get really stressed out by very specific recipes and having to make sure everything's exactly right in my oven. The temperature gauge is not that accurate, so that sort of stresses me out. That takes away all the fun for me for cooking. So just kind of playing it by ear is what I find the most relaxing about it. So let's get started with these stretch and folds. We just want to go around it once, around the dough once, pulling it up. You can see how it's really already starting to develop that gluten, and smells amazing. And as you're doing this, you'll start to feel it get a bit tighter. The dough itself get a bit tighter and more difficult to stretch. So bring it over. And that's it. That's your first set of stretch and folds. So I'm going to pop the lid back on, and I'm going to set another timer for 30 minutes. And I'm going to do that 3 more times over the next couple of hours. But when I come back, we'll be through those stretch and folds and we'll be on to the next step. Okay, we've gone through our set of 4 stretch and folds, and this dough is now looking amazing and smelling amazing. So we're going to move on to the next phase before the overnight rest in the fridge, so I can cook them first thing in the morning. You might be able to see here the bubbles that are popping off in the dough. It's really developing well. I'm super happy with it. I can't tell you how great it smells. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to pop it onto, this is just a pastry mat, a silicone pastry mat. I just find it's easy to clean. We have 4 cats, so our house is full of cat hair. So I try and avoid as much as possible getting cat hair in the bread. Any of you who have cats or dogs or any kind of hairy pet knows that it's just a fact of life that there's fur and hair everywhere. So I guess it's the same with kids. I don't know. But what we're going to do is just pop this out onto the mat. I'm going to divide it into 3 portions because, like I said, I'm making 3 loaves. I've got my bannetons ready. I've only got 2 small ones, so I have to use a large one, even though these are relatively evenly portioned. I've got my cheesecloth for lining them, and rice flour, which I'm going to use, that goes into the bannetons on the cheesecloth just to stop the dough sticking too much to it. But when I'm just doing these, portioning it out and then shaping the loaves to get a nice tight like surface on them, I just use the same flour that I've used in the dough. Not too much though. You want to dry your dough out, and you also need to create some friction to get that tension on the dough when you're shaping the loaves. Here we go. Oh, look at that. Amazing. I've got my large bench scraper because it's easier to shape the loaves when you've got something with a slightly bigger surface area. So, again, I'm not weighing these. I just do it by eye, so that means sometimes the loaves are slightly different in size. But again, I just eyeball it as well. I suppose I can weigh it, but really it's not the end of the world if one loaf is a little bigger than the other 2. It's pretty good. That one's, you look a little big. So let's pop those 2 there. Because once I've shaped these 3 loaves, I let them rest for another 20 minutes before I do the final shaping, and they go inside the bannetons. So I'll give you the quick version of that. So what we're going to do is it's almost a laminating process, the way that we fold these and then shape them. So I want to sort of get it into a rectangle, and you can see how fantastic that how well that gluten's developed. So I'm able to stretch this dough without it tearing. And again, I've just kind of incorporated a lot of different processes or methods for doing this shaping process from a number of different cooks online. Now these are going to be rectangular loaves. These are going, not a boule, but a batard. At this point, I'm just going to shape them into the boule shape, so a round shape. That will work for while they're just sitting for the next 20 minutes. And as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm pulling that towards me. Some people do it like around like this, in order to create surface tension. And if I see any bubbles coming up, I'm just going to pop those, because I like my sourdough to be a little, holy inside, the crumb to not be too tight. I don't want huge holes that butter's just going to melt through and jam's just going to fall through. But I do like it to have a little bit of a kind of painty look, a window painting look. So I don't want to overproof the bread because then you get giant holes. But I don't want to underproof it because I don't want it to be too dense. I want it to have a nice chewy texture, but not too chewy. So here's my first one. And then I'm just going to pop it there. Sprinkle a little flour on top so we don't have the tea towel sticking to it. And then we're just going to cover that up and do the other two. Same process, and we'll get those under the tea towel. They'll sit for 20 minutes and then we'll be back. As you can see, they're proving pretty well. You can see air bubbles over these. What we're going to do now is we're going to get them into their bannetons and then into the fridge so that they can bulk ferment overnight. Then in the morning, first thing when I get up, I'll heat the oven up and we'll get these loaves in and we'll see how they turn out. So let's go with our first guy here. It's clearly had a couple more minutes than the others. Now, as I said, these are going into batard bannetons, so a rectangular loaf rather than a round loaf, which is a boule. I prefer these. I find a boule, you get those, some very small slices, some very larger slices when you get to the middle. This gives you a more consistent slice, a consistent size and shape of slice, which, suits my half-baked OCD down to the ground. I like things to be even and easy to cut and even slices. Suits my need for control. With this, I've put as I said, the cheesecloth in there, and I will just sprinkle rice flour. Rice flour won't absorb more moisture overnight, so it's not going to get into or soak into the loaf or incorporate into the loaf, and it's going to make it easier for me to pop the loaf out in the morning when I pop it into the bread pan. I like to get everything prepared beforehand because I hate not having everything at my fingertips. No more extra flour on this. It's still a little bit sticky, so a little bit of flour on my hands is not going to cause any real issues. And like before, I'm going to stretch this into a vaguely rectangular shape. So when I do shape it, I'm going to get a nice rectangle for the batard banneton. So then just in thirds. I'll show you another way that I like to do it as well, and then we're just going to roll it up. We want that surface tension, yeah? And we want to get a nice log. We want to keep the seam side down as we're pulling it in, and you can see here how that seam is not incorporated. So as I go, I just kind of like to fold it under a little bit, and we're going to just ultimately get a rectangular shape. As you can see there. And it's going to go this tension side down into the banneton. That's going to be where you're going. So gently into there. Now you may or may not be able to see, but that's not all sealed up. What I want to do is I'm going to use kind of a cross stitching deal to get that all sealed up so we don't have any seams that are going to open up overnight and pop that loaf open. I'm going to maintain that tension underneath. A bit more rice flour on here to stop the cheesecloth catching on it and potentially pulling on it in the morning when I take it out. And then I just put it to bed, basically. And then I just use a freezer bag. I'm not that buzzed about using extra plastic, but this is the best way I've found to stop the loaf from drying out to start with. And to kind of assist with that bulk fermentation process. So I've just tied that off. And she's going to bed now in the fridge. Where she will stay for the next 12 to 14 hours. Maybe a little longer, maybe 18. And before she goes into the oven. So I'll show you just the other way I sometimes shape the dough. Again, just that rectangle shape. Get it into a rectangle. Don't let the dough tear. It's got a lot of give. It has, the gluten's really developed and it's really lovely to work with. You might get a little tearing where seeds, pull at the dough a little, but not so much. This one, 1/3 up to the second to 2/3 of the point. Give it a little stretch, pull it in. Give it a little stretch, pull it in. And then I like to pull it over like this. Honestly, I don't know what difference this makes. I don't notice anything too dramatic or too obvious in the actual finished loaf, but you're really building that tension and giving that loaf a nice, like smooth top that goes face down into the banneton. Still can be a little sticky, don't be afraid of it. And I'd love to get my loaves nice and completely even, but one end always ends up fatter than the other for some reason. Rice flour. And in she goes. Be gentle. I mean, I say be gentle, and I'm not rough with these doughs, but they can take quite a bit of intrusive handling. You don't want to overwork it, but the bulk fermentation process gives time for the flavours of the sourdough to develop and also for it to get a lovely crumb, that internal structure of the bread that, well, I mean, you'll see the results tomorrow. Hopefully this is going to turn out well. Hopefully I don't have some kind of catastrophic bread failure for my first video, but I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of having a dud batch, and you shouldn't be either. Whatever the hobby is that you choose to do, whatever the activity you choose to do to help you feel better and calmer and a little more, relaxed about things. Not everyone has the time to do this, I get it. Not everyone is as lucky as me. I have the time now to be able to spend working on something that helps my mental health. But I can highly recommend it if you can find the time. Stop scrolling. Don't doom scroll. Give this a go, because for me, it's been the most remarkable journey, and it makes me feel so great when I can make someone else feel loved and happy by gifting them something that I've made myself. I do it for holidays, for Christmas, for Easter. Food is my love language, as my wife likes to tell me, and that makes me happy, just hearing that, because if I can make somebody feel better doing something that makes me feel better, what a marvelous situation that is. So this one, she's getting wrapped up as well, and I'll get on to the third one. But we'll be back tomorrow morning to see just how these bread loaves are going to turn out. Good morning all, we're back. And here we go with the first loaf. So this has been in the fridge overnight, probably for about 18 hours now, so that beautiful sourdough taste will have really started to develop. Nice. It's just water that I'm spraying onto it. We get a really nice finish with the rice flour and the scoring. So okay, now it's time to pop it in the oven. I pop an ice cube in here because I want that ear to pop and develop on the bread, and if I have a bit more moisture in here in the initial stages, it'll stop that crust from hardening up too quickly. And we'll be back when she's done. Well, we're finished with our 3 loaves. They're out of the oven, so let's have a look. Pretty happy with how these have turned out. So like you can see, they're a great size. They're not too enormous. And I can guarantee that a couple of my neighbours are going to be very, very happy this afternoon once these have cooled down and I can pop them in a bag. Sometimes I like it to be a little darker on the crust. I much prefer that. But I like to kind of experiment. And boy, it's never not satisfying when they all come out like this. They smell amazing. And I cannot wait for them to cool down enough that I can cut into them. Now, they're going in the pantry because one of our cats really likes the smell of freshly cooked bread, and I can't leave them on the counter to cool or he will try and drag one away. Well, thanks for joining me for my first video. I had a lot of fun making it. It's a real learning curve, but I hope that you enjoyed what you saw here today. And if you did, please hit subscribe and like. Anything I've used for my recipes, I will list links in the show notes below. But if you have any questions or suggestions or requests for something you'd like to see me cook, then please pop it in the comments. I would absolutely love to hear from you. I really love cooking. As I've said, it really supports my mental health, and it has done for a really long time. When I was a police officer, I saw and experienced and was involved in a lot of really hard stuff. And the only way that you can get through that in one piece, and I won't pretend that I'm in one piece, but I've done pretty well because I've had great people around me, and I've had things that I've done to support my mental health, to help me to decompress after terrible experiences. And now that I've left the police force, I'm continuing to do that in order to make sure that I have a healthy and happy next 40 years. I really hope that I can show you some techniques that will allow you to maybe do a similar thing to get right in your head and your heart. It's really important. So please join me next time when we will make something different. I don't even know what that's going to be yet, but I guess we'll see then. Take it easy.